All right, next hand here under the gun raises it up to $30 this time, and we look down at a pocket pair. Wired sixes this time on the button. I'm gonna go ahead and make the call here. All the other participants at the table fold. So heads up to another flop, which comes down pretty favorable for these pocket sixes. Ace, 7, 6 with a flush draw. He checks it over to us. We will not be checking back. We will be searching for some value here. I bet $30, and my opponent calls fairly quickly. Turn is an offsuit 10, which is kind of interesting because the most obvious straight draw comes in, but I would expect my opponent to bet that on the flop. I would expect him to c-bet that, having good equity with an open-ender and no showdown value and representing an ace. So I would pretty much expect my opponent to always c-bet if he happened to have the 8-9 here. So not too worried and going for more value. I bet $100 this time after my opponent checks to me. And it does get pretty interesting here. My opponent check raises now. Check raises 4x, that's 4 black chips, $400. He's got about $800 behind this bet. And we have a decision now between flat calling and going ahead and raising all in. And I think flat calling here makes a lot of sense. The times where he ever has some sort of a bluffing hand, we don't want to fold out those hands. We do run some risk of, say, losing value versus a hand such as ace 10 if a diamond rolls off on the river. But I think that is just the nature of the game, the nature of the strategy. So I'm just gonna go ahead and flat call here, take this one to the river and keep my opponent's range as wide as possible. River's pretty bricky, it's an offsuit 4, 5-8 gets there now, but again, I think it's pretty similar in nature to the 7-8 discussion. A, how often is he gonna have 5-8 raising from under the gun, and B, how often is he not gonna c-bet that? So we're either losing to pocket aces, pocket 10s, perhaps, could be a hand that would play it this way. That's about it, because I'd also expect him to bet pocket 7s on the flop, for example. So when my opponent wagers all of his money, we don't hesitate to go ahead and make the call. My opponent shows us pocket 8s, which is an interesting play because he's using the 8s as blockers to the straight. We have a set here. We're never going to fold a set. We're also not playing pot limit Omaha, and if we were, then I would consider folding the 6s for sure. You know, using 2 blockers in PLO, pretty standard. In no limit hold'em, I definitely dig the play. And I'm going to be put in a tough spot with various other holdings, but a set going to be a little bit straightforward here. So we are going to win a big pot. Next hand, a very similar situation. The player on my right raises it up to 30 bucks. This time I have ace jack of clubs. We're kind of in early-ish position here, so if there's some other formations where I'll definitely consider a 3-bet with ace jack of clubs. This one, just going to put in the flat call versus an early position raiser. Player on my left, once again, thinks otherwise. 3-bet time once again, same sizing, 130 bucks. This time the player on my right does call, and we got 40% of a royal flush, so we're going nowhere. I make the call as well. 3 ways to queen, queen, 6 with 2 spades. Player on my right checks, I check, and the 3-better puts out a c-bet. Same size as pre-flop, 130 bucks. Player on my right folds. So I guess it's kind of an interesting spot here. You know, not the flop of dreams, of course, with ace, jack of clubs, but we got some information from him last hand. He's willing to 3-bet with a hand like king jack, so he doesn't necessarily need to have a premium here. Granted, maybe he's aware of that as well, and he's not just gonna be rampantly 3-betting now that he's shown down that hand, but you know, he showed it down because he flopped a full house, and it's fun to show down favorable flops and such. So anyway, I don't think he necessarily has to have a super premium here. I'm gonna go ahead and make the call. Ace jack is gonna be winning sometimes. Can do some things on later streets. So heads up to a turn card, which is a brick. I check, and this time he checks it back. River's a 3rd spade, and I'm not too sure how often I'm gonna be able to win here at showdown. Granted, we, again, could have the best hand here sometimes. I think we're also going to be losing to ace-king, and I think there's merit to trying to go ahead and fold out that hand specifically. In order to do so, I don't need to bet all that big because he loses to flushes, he loses to a queen. So we're not going to fold out his premium holdings such as aces or kings. He could have a flush as well since we don't have any blockers to that hand class, but I'm going to try. I don't think ace-jack, I'm really super eager to try and take to showdown here. So I bet small, $210, and my opponent immediately folds. Doesn't even think about it, lets it go right away. So I guess I'm pretty happy there with the reverse float. Again, could have had the best hand all the way, but just in case he had ace-king, pretty happy with the result. All right, in this next hand, I just returned to the table after missing my blinds, so I put out the straddle in the under the gun position, and there is a middle position raise to 80 bucks. We look down at ace-deuce of diamonds in the straddle spot. I think we have a defend here. You know, stack sizes are diminished, so I don't know if it's going to be super profitable for us, but I think it's a reasonable defend. Suited wheel ace, going to go ahead and make the call. Heads up to a flop in which we flop ourselves a flush draw, Jack 8, 7, 2 diamonds. I check and my opponent bets 90. In hindsight, I think I like a check raise here. The main reason is because this is a straddled pot and therefore stack sizes, effective stack sizes are going to be diminished a little bit. The initial raise being $80 here, where before this standard raise is 30 bucks. So there's more money in the pot pre-flop in a heads up spot. I think we should be check raising, especially being out of position. Nut flush draw seems like a pretty good candidate. In the moment, I think I sort of go into PLO mode where I'm not blocking any strong hands. I don't have blockers to the straight. I don't have blockers to sets or two pairs or anything like that. So I sort of default to a check call. But I think in no limit, probably check raise and just go with it in a straddled pot. Nut flush draw is going to be fine. So I check call. We're off to a turn card. It comes down an offsuit king, which gives us a gut shot to Broadway now. I check it. My opponent does not stop betting. He bets $270. I stick with a passive route, which again, I'm not super in love with being out of position, and we only have ace high, not any showdown value, I wouldn't think, on this kind of a board. I check call again, and we are off to a river card, which is an offsuit deuce. We make a pair. It's a pair of twos. It's the worst possible pair in No Limit Texas Hold'em. I check it. My opponent announces he would like to wager all of his chips. Don't think we can call with a pair of twos. Seems reckless. I would have to drink way more Maui Brewing coconut cream ales from Cerveza Bottle Shop and Tap Room to consider making this call. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to let it go. So yeah. You know, I guess we would not have won if we check raised all in and got called on previous streets, but we don't know if we would have gotten called. We might have applied appropriate fold equity. We might have been able to win the hand. That's why you play aggressively in No Limit Texas Hold'em. Give yourself another way to win the pot rather than just hoping that your cards come out. Anyway, not really thrilled with the way I played this hand, but it is what it is. All right, interesting hand here where we see an early position raise to the standard $30 with no straddle on. Small blind calls, we have pocket tens in the big blind. We could consider a raise here, squeezing the flat caller on our right, and we are going to be playing the hand out of position. That's never a good thing in this game, but seeing as the raise came from early position and we don't really want to face a 4-bet, I go ahead and flat call. So 3 ways to a flop this time, in which we flop ourselves an overpair. 5, 4, 3, 2 diamonds. Small blind checks, I check, and the initial raiser puts out a wager of 40 bucks. Player on my right calls, pretty standard flat call here. 3 ways still to a turn card, which comes another 3. Player on my right checks, I check, and the initial raiser doesn't stop betting. $110 this time. Player on my right calls. So again, I don't think we have too much of a decision here. I think it's going to be a call. Maybe some other overcards such as like 7s or 8s we could consider folding here. But I think there's enough of those hands in my opponent's ranges where 10s is going to be the best hands here a good percentage of the time. I think we're also a little bit under repped. This is probably the best hand pre-flop that I would flat call with. Pocket jacks, basically always 3-betting. Pocket tens, I think, is the first hand that I would consider flat calling, and then on down from there. Of course, we could have better hands in our range. 5's full, 4's full, ace 3 suited, 6, 7, although we'd probably check raise that on the flop. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, we're pretty close to the top of our range, I think. So I'm gonna go ahead and make another call here. River's an offsuit 8. The opponent on my right checks. I'm gonna check it, trying to get showdown here, but the initial raiser is not gonna stand for that. He bets to the tune of $510. Player on my right goes into the tank and thinks about it for a decent while. I'm not too sure it's going to matter either way, though. I think my opponent is going to be a little bit polarized here. My opponent in early position, that is. He's going to be a little bit polarized here. I don't think he's going to be betting 9s anymore. I think he's just going to shut that down. He's not going to be betting a hand like ace 5. So I don't think we beat any more value hands. It doesn't really matter. My opponent eventually does decide on a call, and now I think we have a very standard fold. But I think it might have been a standard fold anyway after we've taken this line. So I let it go, and our opponent in early position shows down the ace-deuce offsuit, which is a flopped straight. It's a flopped wheel. My opponent on my right, he lets it go. He can't beat that, of course. But shout out to my buddy Ian, who opens it up from early position with an ace-deuce offsuit. You love to see it. Job well done, Ian. Crack of the pocket tens and probably another pocket pair on my right. Easy game, you guys. Learn from Ian. Open the ace-deuce offsuit from early position, and you too can be a winner at the Bellagio. So a good session, some good news and some bad news. We have a good 5-10 no limit hold'em session at the Bellagio. Not an amazing result, but it's a winning result. We get into the game for the original $1,500 max buy-in, cash out to the tune of somewhere around $900 in profit.